Welcome to Conscious Woman Rising, remembering the sound of the embodied feminine. My name's Deepika Delmenico, and I am the founder and host of Conscious Woman Rising Summit. And it is an absolute honour today to be in conversation with Jane Hardwick Collings. Jane is a midwife, a teacher, a writer, and menstrual educator. Jane gives workshops in Australia and internationally on mother and daughter preparation for menstruation, the spiritual practice of menstruation, and the sacred dimensions of pregnancy, birth, and menopause, and of course the wisdom of the cycles. Jane founded and runs the School of Shamanic Womancraft, which is an international women's mystery school. Jane is the author of 13 Moons, How to Chart Your Menstrual Cycle, Spinning Wheels, A Guide to the Cycles, Becoming a Woman for Girls Approaching Menstruation, and 10 Moons, The Inner Journey of Pregnancy. Jane is a compelling presenter, a solid, down-to-earth, great visionary. You really are, Jane.
Aww.
And your service to humanity, not just to women, to humanity, all of humanity, in service of the great divine mother. Mother Earth is benefiting thousands of women's lives all across the world. It's inspiring, it's powerful, and it is so fundamentally necessary at this point in time. So, thank you. Good on you. Thank you for being you, and for listening to the calling, Jane, and for saying yes and having the guts to be vocal, to be present, to be active, and to take action for remembering and reclaiming our inherent rights by grand design as women.
Thank you, Deepika, and thank you for all you're doing. It's going to be a joint effort, this one.
It's a collaboration, isn't it, Jane?
Yeah. So the more we can support each other in our work and encourage each other. I find often I need a pep talk every so often from a sister, so thank you for my one for today. That was great.
You're welcome. Yeah. Well, it's, because we have to keep filling our own cup. And it takes such energy and capacity and compassion to keep offering in service in the way that you do. And so to pause and be able to listen regularly in a way that you're able to continuously acknowledge all that you are doing is such a nourishing elixir for keeping your own cup topped up, I think.
Yeah.
Well, it's so juicy. It's just so juicy and abundant to be in conversation with you. So I'd love to kick off today, Jane, with asking, how did we get here? How did generations of women become denatured and disempowered from their very own menstrual cycle, from their very own, from the innate and sacred business of birthing?
How did that happen? Well, right question. So What just popped into my mind then when you said that was years and years ago when my baby, who's now 26, was in fifth class at school, and he was going to a Steiner school. So it's always been my experience that the level of attention that they give to a child's education is what I would want for my child. And he came home with an assignment, and it was, when did women get the vote? And I said to him, don't you reckon the right question would be, why didn't they have it in the first place? And so, he's like, well, yeah, why didn't they? And then that enabled me to launch into my answer, which is the answer to your question that you've just asked me. And I got the opportunity to speak this in a modified version to his class and give them the backstory to one of the questions that's so often asked about when did women get the vote. So basically, how we got into this situation is well documented in the her story, as opposed to the his story. So history, his story, the story of the past written by the people who won, the victors. And then there's the her story, which is the story of women and how the patriarchy affected them. And I've written a thing on this. I've just got a little copy of it here. It's her story.
Great.
And so this is available for free to everybody who signs up on my database, and we can send it to all your subscribers as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I'll share the link with everybody.
Awesome. So basically what happened is we are under our culture, and almost every culture on the planet is under a patriarchal spell that includes menstrual taboo. So what that means is that the menstrual cycle is seen as, well, taboo meaning that no one talks about it. Funnily enough, taboo's original meaning actually means sacred, but it was twisted like so many other things. But basically, menstrual taboo, which puts women's cycles and therefore their body and therefore themselves into a place of disgust, actually. And this is found, we can trace this back to through the history of all ancient civilizations and the development of all organized religions. So in all the key texts of the major faiths of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, they all hold somewhere in their texts that menstrual blood and women who menstruate, I'm just reading my notes here, are unclean, impure, and are responsible for everything from failing crops to contaminating meat. So that's the basis of that women and, well, their bodies and their cycles, therefore their whole selves, are seen as less than at the very least and evil at the most. And then enter the 1100s, and from the 12th century till the 17th century, we have the Inquisition. And it was a 500-year reign of organized terrorism, organized by the Roman Catholic Church. And the mission was to eliminate all those who continued to go along with the old religion, the peasants, the pagans. Where pagan just means peasant. So everybody who wasn't going along with the new religion of the one Father God ruling over everybody with a male superiority were eradicated during that 500-year period of time. And other names it's given are the burning times or the witch hunts. And there were places in Europe where entire populations of women were burned at the stake. There are records, you know, there's no actual kind of head count of how many people died, but you can read in all kinds of documents about these times, and some of them say up to 9 million women were killed during this period of time. And as I said, entire populations of some townships. So it's very easy to see that the people at that time were getting a very strong message that to be a woman was actually not supported by the culture and gotten rid of mostly. And it was the heretics that they burned at the stake. Anybody who didn't go along with the religion, and then mainly women, and their men that tried to keep them safe, and children, and it was just dreadful. So, you know, think about that back then. That's many generations ago. However, in all of our European bloodlines, there is the actual memory of this.
Yes.
In our DNA and in our red thread, our mother line, we have the memories of our mothers or sisters or aunties or whoever getting killed for not going along with the dominant religion, or the other, that they killed all the midwives and they killed all the women healers. And at the same time also the Roman Catholic Church was getting power over the medical profession, and learning medicine to be a medical practitioner was barred for women, so women weren't allowed to do it. So then they knew that any woman who was practicing any sort of healing must be a witch, and so they eradicated the healers and women's wisdom. So that's two ways we got into this situation: the menstrual taboo from the early religions, and then the witch hunt and the denial and killing of women's wisdom. So it was too dangerous to know about your body, and to, you know, even herbs for healing and all of that. So they're basically the main reasons of why we got into this situation, and we are climbing back out of that abyss. But when I do my workshops, I give this history to women to read, and it's, you know, it's telling and shocking how few people even know that it happened.
Yeah, it's incredibly sobering. It just commands silence to even be able to hold an imagination of what really took place, of what actually occurred in mankind.
And continues to.
And continues to. And it also, with that cellular memory impressed upon our very DNA, it doesn't make it okay, but one can recognize why mediocrity is accepted as the norm.
At least you're alive.
Because it was physically dangerous to be great, to be courageous enough to pursue your own sacred nature, and to even tap into the resonance of the healing gesture. Would have been a dangerous thing. So people just really shut down their light. All people would have shut down their light, let alone women. The creative light, the creative force by which, you know, pulsates through a woman's being by grand design, would have been guarded and sheltered very, very cautiously.
And we would have shut off from all the messages that our bodies were giving us.
They were dangerous to listen into.
Yeah, and also the earth.
Yes.
You know, remember the dominant perspective was that man had power over the earth and all the beings, animals, etc. So that shuts down a whole nother level of connection and communication. Because we're all one, right? You know, like all the information that's coming out now through science that's proving all of this stuff. I love how, you know, all this recent stuff connecting us to trees, and how trees are not just wood standing in the ground, they're all talking to each other, and we can be part of that. And, you know, so we are reclaiming, we are reconnecting, but a lot of damage has been done in the meantime.
Yeah.
And mostly people don't know about it. So when I did all the research to write that Her Story back in the early 2000s for my workshops, I was aware of it because being a midwife, I knew the connection between witches and midwives, and that midwives were the ones burnt at the stake. But when I put all the story together of the Her Story, it answered a lot of questions I didn't even know I had, if that makes sense. Like, it helped me make sense of so much, in like what you just said, that mediocrity makes sense. If,
yes.
you know, just do whatever you can to stay undercover and not get noticed, because the effect of that could be the end of everything. And it's not just like about the women being killed. It's like, you know, what happened to their children, what happened to their families, and their, like, you know, so it affected many more people as well as the ones who were killed. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's the opposite. It's the absolute polar opposite to the very substance of life itself.
Yeah, and it's still going on.
Love. It's just so, it's so extreme, and so
and it's still going on,
and still going on today
in many places on the earth right now as we speak.
So I would recommend to everybody listening in all across the world to download and access Her Story, because it feels to me that, and I'm going to do so myself, because a fundamental part of our putting ourselves back together, in our remembering of ourselves, is to be educated. And so it's a really pivotal part for us to be able to reclaim our birthright and to embody our feminine nature, is to understand what took place that is impacting our very being.
Yep.
Through our bloodlines.
Yep.
Whether we're of that heritage or not, it's impacting all of us.
Fully.
It's certainly my bloodlines.
Mine too.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Well, can you explain? I mean, I could stay here with this. So much more for you to share, and I'd really love for you to speak to how cultivating relationship to the blood mysteries is essential to really expand our consciousness as women, as human beings.
Yeah. So just to say what the blood mysteries is, in case some people don't know, another term for it is the women's mysteries. So women's mysteries, blood mysteries, all the same thing. And basically what they are our rites of passage through life that are oriented around our blood. So it's, the blood mysteries are classically known as menarche or menarche, menarche, the first period, and then birth, the giving birth, and then menopause, the cessation of the menstrual cycle and fertility. So those three times in our lives, and obviously you can have many pregnancies and many births, but one menarche and one menopause. And then obviously the bookends for both of those are your own birth and your death. So that's what the blood mysteries are, that orient around the menstrual cycle, the blood. So cultivating relationship with the blood mysteries as a way to essential move to expand consciousness is, well, for women, and you know what women do affects everybody, so that's a good place to work at in terms of raising consciousness, because that's the thing that has to happen right now in our world. We need to raise consciousness so that people go, oh my goodness, what's happening is not right, let's change it. So what happens when women reconnect with the blood mysteries, because they can only be disconnected to a degree, because it's actually their body doing it. So it activates their consciousness to just recognize it's going on. That's if they haven't drugged it out of being. But basically, when we
do,
yep, when we reconnect with our cycle, our menstrual cycle, which is really, as I said, what the blood mysteries hangs on, we rewild ourselves. Love that word.
I love that word.
Yeah.
It's like, oh.
Yeah, because, you know, it's such the right word for now, because when we're not connected to the magic and the power of our menstrual cycle, we are not wild. We are domesticated. We are tamed, and we are reinforcing a disconnection from our nature. And our nature is to be cyclical beings. And when we reconnect to our cycle, we rewild ourselves, and then we have access to our full being. Like, so, you know, when we're not connected to our body and our cycle and like everything that she tells us, we're operating without a lot of the information that we need to be living. So just the very concept of connecting into our cycle is one step, but then realizing it's running your life, whether you know it or not, and everybody else and
everybody on the planet's lives.
Yeah, and especially those who live with you. Yeah, and I often say
directly impacted.
Yeah, and I often say, if you don't believe that, ask them, and everybody has a chuckle.
Oh yes,
yeah. So, in cultivating relationship with the blood mysteries, it means we cultivate relationship with our body. When we've got our body online and accessible as part of our tool, you know, like it's much more than that. I'm just trying to use words that'll help make sense.
Yeah.
Then we are likely to function to our capacity, not as in terms of can't go any further. I mean our potential.
Infinite potential.
So it's rewilding and then wholing with a W. So it helps us become more whole when we reconnect back in and remember, as you said, like putting ourselves back together with the information that our cycle, the blood mysteries, and the impact and power of those rites of passage. So menarche, you know, like what happens at menarche when a girl comes into womanhood, when her periods start, when she becomes fertile, whatever happens at that time teaches her on a subliminal level, which means she doesn't even know that she's being taught, how her culture values the next role she's going into. So in this case, at menarche, it's woman.
Yes.
And therefore how to behave to be accepted by the culture. So, you know, because we know that that's what happens, it behooves us to be welcoming our daughters into womanhood in an empowering way, which will be most likely a 180-degree turn from how most of us were welcomed into menarche, which was probably with nothing more than, here's the pads, get on with it, don't let anybody know, and whatever you do, don't leak.
Yes.
So this tapping into the blood mysteries shows us many points in our lives for what I call positive intervention, where we can actually do things that are going to help the healing and maybe not even start the wounding if you can get in early enough with the girls. And obviously the same thing goes for boys at their rites of passage. They are having the same thing. And the thing is that, you know, some people say, oh, well, I didn't have a rite of passage, so that didn't happen to me. The thing is that whatever happened was the rite of passage.
That was the initiation.
Yes.
So there's purpose and meaning to it. Karmically, there must be.
Yep.
Or it wouldn't be the experience that an individual has. But this is the very stuff, Jane, that you've founded a school and you teach this throughout the world. But this is the stuff and substance that is necessary in all schools, in all institutions or any learning education environment, because this is the stuff of nature.
Yes.
This is the nature of consciousness. And it's so ironic when I think about the challenges and difficulties that women often experience throughout their entire menarche, and then really crack open an experience in a different, often deeper, more destabilizing way in menopause, is the rewilding as it's trying to wake them up, to simply listen, to recognize, to get in touch with. And that's often drugged out of people. And that's ignored, or strategies are put in place to manage it, but never to really cultivate a listening awareness.
Which is the point.
Relationship to it.
Yeah. So just on what you said about schools, so we're onto it. Like there's a lot of people around the world realizing that menstrual education is inadequate. And there's things changing and happening. And in Australia, where we are right now, there's been a wonderful project that's about to be born with a publication with lots of recommendations. That's the result of a lot of research that we've done for talking to women and girls about their experience of the menstrual cycle and menopause and their experience of menarche and such. So there will be very soon a much better approach to menstrual education in schools and in HR departments and in universities and everywhere where people gather. Because the other thing that is coming from that as well is, you know, we can have all these great ideas, but how are we actually going to implement them? So one of the new things that's coming now, newish, you know, there are places that already have it, and there's plenty of places who are saying no way, is the whole concept of a menstrual and menopause workplace policy. So that's what honouring the cycles looks like when it's applied to life and work. So that's another thing that's happening and going to happen more. So that's a good thing.
Fantastic. So how can people learn more about this and support this and raise their awareness?
Okay, well, on my website, janehardwickcollings.com, I've written quite a bit about menstrual and menopause workplace policies and the pathologization of the menstrual cycle and what that's doing to us. So have a look there. And the book that's coming out soon will be called About Bloody Time. And and the idea of menstrual and menopause workplace policies, I have given presentations on this, and I'm available to help workplaces, and I've got some companies that I'm helping. And I imagine once some of the bigger, more pioneering and visionary corporates start doing this, then it'll have a bit of a snowball effect and begin to take hold. So yeah, so do your research and read the information about it, and ask for menstrual and menopause workplace policies in your workplace or at your school or whatever. So this is part of like how we have to make it real, you know, like Yeah.
Yeah. And if not doing so already, and if women listening are still menstruating women, then start practicing it in your own life.
Yeah.
Start with yourself.
Yeah. And for women,
spiritual practice.
Exactly.
As a spiritual being in a physical body, it's the most innate spiritual practice for a woman.
Yeah. Yeah. And whatever she does with her menstrual cycle is her spiritual practice. So it will be having the effect on her that a spiritual practice does, which is to reinforce all of the, beliefs and practices that you engage in when you do it. So if you're doing it in a negative way, that's what you're reinforcing. You're reinforcing loathing and disgust and all those sorts of things that sit behind the disappearing and ignoring of the menstrual cycle and the putting down of it. Like, the biggest clue with all of this, I always say, is that anything to do with the feminine that's put down or made fun of or spoken of in, negative ways is a clue that it holds power. So, or if it's feared, like childbirth.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
and it also shows, it's very revealing of a culture.
Exactly.
A society.
And it also shows, like, you can link the way a culture treats the earth is the way they treat the feminine, and vice versa.
Yes.
Because we are all as if the earth, we don't visit nature, we are nature. And how women care for themselves or not, and how the culture cares for them or not, is a big clue to where things can change for the healing, for all our relations.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jane, masses and masses of modern women living in our contemporary world, are overdoing things. Doing, constantly doing, not practicing clueless as to how to be. And what is a fundamental practice for women to do regularly to remember this very sound, to feel into the very throb of one's own being?
Well, I would say that when we're being like that and doing like that, as you said, that we're simply doing what we think we're supposed to do. Like the patriarchal culture is a 24/7 on, no rest time, no downtime, produce, achieve. And like, we know that that's not sustainable. Like, we are the generation that has to be the ones that go, oh, whoops, we can't live like that. Yet we continue. So what would be something that a woman could do to help herself in that situation? Would be, firstly, to notice it. Notice that she's living by someone else's rules and timetable, and to notice the dance of the earth and the sun in a day, and to notice her energy as she goes through the day. Like, notice the waxing and the waning in a day of her energy and her needs, physical needs, and her mood. And then to actually notice that over a month or a moon, and over her cycle, her moon cycle, her menstrual cycle. So to actually notice that she is not built for, made for, designed to keep going all the time, every day. It's not what her body is organized to do. And anybody's, so not just women, everybody.
Yes.
But women have a stricter cycle, not stricter, a more obvious cycle to go with than men do. Men are like the sun. They're they're up and they're down and they're on and they're off, and they follow the moon like every other creature on the planet. But women with their cycle. So the thing to do to basically unhook from the do is to be, and to notice how different you feel every day, and that's actually what you're supposed to be feeling different every day, and how that affects your mood, your food cravings, your energy levels, your libido, your mental capacity, your physical energy, your dreams, etc., like everything. And because the trick here is that we can actually be heaps more productive if we work with our cycle rather than keep on going all day, every day.
Yes.
And one of the ways that that we notice it's not working is through our menstrual cycle. So our menstrual cycle, to quote Alexandra Pope of Red School, the menstrual cycle is the barometer of our well-being. So for a woman, all the ways she's not living in harmony with her body and her cycle will show up in her menstrual cycle.
Yes.
As pain, as irregularity, as heavy bleeding, as period stopping, as, worst case scenario, endometriosis, polycystic ovary, infertility, blah, 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 all those things
of
that
which are prevalent.
And increasing.
Prevalent, absolutely. Absolutely.
So the menstrual cycle as an entity is calling out, screaming out for attention. And she is showing us the disharmony physically and everything that is the result of women not living according to their cycle. So these things will show up in our menstrual cycle, but also in our sleep cycle or not.
Yes.
And in our physicality, like our bodies, and how we eat or don't, and how we are in relationship. Like, it's not just, just get it better one day. It's like it's affecting every single thing. So we need to get off the go, fast as you can, patriarchal race, and slow down. And the best medicine is to spend as much time as you can in the woods or in the forest or in the garden, so in nature. That has a recalibration effect on our bodies.
Saturate yourself in that environment.
Yeah. So those two things: spend time outside, barefoot on the earth as much as you can, and eat food that's seasonally appropriate and ripe, and get back in with your cycle, because if you don't, something will happen to make you.
Absolutely. Well, the cosmic patterns are going to come knocking on your door in one form or another, because there's purpose to them. And if you're not in rhythm with those patterns, they'll show up.
Yeah. We ignore these cycles to our peril.
I love that. We do ignore them to our peril. It's like trying to get in the boxing ring with nature. Yeah. Pick your opponent wisely.
Yes, exactly.
It's great advice. So unplug. Get unplugged.
Yeah, exactly. And like just basic stuff like get off your screens.
Yeah.
Go to bed before 10:30.
Yes, yeah.
Reduce your lighting as the sun goes down, so that you're not tricking your mind in that it's still day, and you make more cortisol to stay awake. Like, it's really basic and simple.
Yeah. So that's great. Thank you. I'd like to ask about the sacred dimensions of pregnancy and what happens when a woman births to all of her subtle bodies, to all of the sheaths. So, to her etheric body, to her chitti, to the consciousness, to her astrality.
Well,
Soul at that sacred moment of birthing, because just as life and death are the two most monumental bookends in human life, what occurs, the mystery of what occurs at that moment of birthing is something I'd love if you're able to speak.
Yeah.
Because I've pondered it for a
Yeah.
long time.
Well, it's the big moment, you know, and what happens at birth is going to affect a lot of people forever at each birth. So it is such a significant time that really must be held sacred. But it's only held sacred by people who hold life sacred.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to see life as sacred to see birth as sacred. And sacred has lovely, I love to look at the word roots and histories of words, and sacred goes to blood, and sacred also goes to holy, and holy goes to whole, as in WHOLE. So I feel when we use the term sacred to describe birth, pregnancy, conception, pregnancy, and birth, then what we're tapping into is an understanding of the huge significance and therefore responsibility that we have to hold it so gently and carefully and dear and safely and respectfully and sacredly. So as you said, you know, it's the connection of birth and death. It's the same portal. Many women see or feel or experience that, and people who have the privilege of being in the environment when the baby's being born. So in terms of what happens to every part of the woman, I feel like she accesses this portal that is birth and death, and she is in that moment the cosmic womb, the earth herself, and is the interface between here and wherever, where new souls come in through her at the connection between the baby's placenta and her womb. That's where I think is the portal, the place.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
And so a woman is rebirthed as well through the process. Yes. She's born to be the mother of 1, 2, 3, however many, because she's a very different creature each time.
Yes.
And born to be the birth experience is birthing her as a mother, the mother that this baby's come for. So the experience holds within it everything she needs to know about herself, to learn about herself, to be the mother this baby's come for.
And that's so beautiful. Thank you so much. And it really brings it back in full circle to why people that did not understand their own inherent power persecuted midwives, because they are the custodians and guardians and facilitators of this incredibly sacred moment.
Definitely. And you know, the eradication of midwives is continuing today.
It continues.
Midwives in Australia are an endangered species, and the you know, there continues to be a hunt to get rid of them. And so midwives, as you said, are the guardians of the birth process, whereas the medical model is more about controlling risks and delivering, you know, the child for the culture. And throughout the history of childbirth in the last few thousand years, there's story after story in every culture of the various rituals that they've done that separate mother and baby at birth. So midwives would never do that. They see the mother and the baby as one and know the importance of holding that bubble safe and sacred. Whereas all these practices in very many different ones in many different cultures that separate the mother and the baby, you know, got to go and it needs resuscitating. It needs to be washed. It needs to be weighed. It mustn't have colostrum because that's bad. Or, you know, there's so many different ways, because once you separate a mother and baby at birth, then you've done the deal and the baby is more connected to the culture than the mother. On a very deep level that people don't even realize.
Oh, but it's very real. In fact, there's an anthroposophic remedy that we work with, and it's the homeopathic remedy of amniotic fluid that is in fact often very indicated where there has been such separation, to work on that really unconscious, subtle level. But this is, you know, I'm so appreciative and grateful that this is where we're at in this conversation today, because whether or not listeners have birthed themselves, they have been birthed. So it's very, very relevant. And if anybody listening has birthed, then this is something to contemplate and to really reflect upon. How the experience was, and because we're the storytellers too, and children imitate us. All daughters will imitate us. So our relationship to birth and sacred birth is just so fundamental.
Yeah, and I would add that every pregnancy results in a birth. So that includes miscarriages,
yes,
and abortions.
Yes, all sacred, all very, very purposeful. There was incredible intentional sacred purpose and meaning
in everything.
All of those, in everything. No accidents. Great lessons to be learnt as consequent of action, but no accidents. Yeah. Oh, Jane, thank you so much. So I encourage everybody listening again to follow up the links and to tap into Jane's website and access some of the resources and materials that you have available for people, because this is it's fundamental work, and Jane cannot do this single-handedly.
No, I can't. I've written a nice new. I've written a children's book.
Yeah,
it's called Mother Nature's Wisdom.
Mother Nature's Wisdom. And where can we access?
That's available on my website through the bookstore on my website, Mother Nature's Wisdom.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And that was part of my mission to, begin this education of connecting to the earth and the grand cycles for children.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. So it's like the wish fulfilling cow. You just keep giving and giving and giving. Jane, infinite gratitude to you and love for all you bring, for all you offer so selflessly. in service of the divine.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you. And there's lots of ways people can join in too.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've got a Patreon page now, which is a subscription model where people can sign up for small amounts per month and get this wisdom shared with them. And I've also started a grassroots revolution. Not started it, it's continued, it's the same one. But basically we're called the Agents of the Goddess. And people can join up to participate in this, as I said, grassroots level of activating memories of people for connecting back to the earth and waking people up to what's actually going on. So, for example, we recently had the first of our sort of actions that we've been doing, and this is a group currently of 100 plus women from all over the world, from Finland to New Zealand and everywhere in between. So we're doing work together to help wake people up. But these actions we're doing, the one we did just at the end of last year, and these actions are called cunning stunts. So
Great.
Our cunning stunt number one was synchronized global blood prayers. So for women who were menstruating, or for women who'd finished, to do it with just water or
Yes.
some red fluid,
Yes.
and to return the blood to the earth and to let go of body shame and blood or menstrual shame. So there's lots of action going on if people want to actually do something.
Yeah, fantastic. And so I encourage everybody to do so, because it's a worthwhile thing to do, and it's powerful. It's, don't underestimate how we can make a difference. And we really, well, the buck stops with us. We're the ones we have to be the change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you are.
Yes. Yeah. And you do it because we are agents of the goddess. We go to sleep to rest and to renew and receive, the drop of divine nourishment, so that we can wake up and continue the work, because it doesn't stop. To ignore it would be at our own peril. It would be at my own peril. We know what we have to do. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jane. And thanks for being part of Conscious Woman Rising. It's such a gift. It's such a gift that you contribute and have shared so much, so that all of us can remember this. What does it even sound like? This divine force that moves through us, that we breathe in, that moves through all of life. Just wants us to come home. So good on you. Thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you.